Welcome to Civics and Coffee. My name is Alicia, and I am a self-professed history nerd. Each week, I'm going to chat about a topic on U.S. history and give you both the highlights and occasionally break down some of the complexities in history and share stories you may not remember learning in high school, all in the time it takes to enjoy a cup of coffee. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Wait, what am I doing posting an episode on Tuesday? Don't I normally drop on Saturdays? Yes, you are correct. But today, you get a special bonus episode. Why? Well, because today in the United States is voting day. And voting is a sacred, though albeit sometimes irritating, civic duty. And because it's a civic duty, how could I not do an episode on voting? The name of the podcast is Civics and Coffee. Duh. While many Americans have an aversion to voting, it is one of the cornerstones of our democracy. Believe it or not, the right to vote was something not easily given to a mass majority of the country as we know it today. Normally, I would say grab your coffee, but I know voting causes anxiety. So, grab your cocktail of choice and let's do this. I will even join you in grabbing my own alcoholic beverage. It's about to get lit, y'all. First, a Jeopardy question. Does the Constitution of the United States guarantee your right to vote? If you said yes, I hate to break it to you, but you would be wrong. The Constitution provides for no guarantee of an individual's right to vote. Yup, I'm not kidding. Though many believe they were granted the right to vote upon becoming a United States citizen, the truth of the matter is the Constitution only mentions providing for equal protection to the right to vote, such as preventing somebody from voting because they're too young, a woman, or a person of color, though that itself took many edits and amendments. While the Constitution spells out a lot of things, separation of powers, Congress's ability to levy and collect taxes, and so on, it only mentions voting in Article 1, Section 2, stating, quote, "The House of Representatives shall be composed of members chosen every second year by the people of several states, and the electors in each state shall have the qualifications requisite for electors of the most numerous branch of the state legislature." End quote. Translation, you could only vote for your federal representative every 2 years if you were eligible to vote according to your state's voting requirements. Due to the many restrictions on state voting, this quickly disqualified Black Americans, Natives, and women from the franchise. The idea that there's no guarantee to the right to vote was confirmed in the opinion of the United States Supreme Court in their landmark decision in Bush v. Gore in 2000, when the courts wrote, quote, "The individual citizen has no federal constitutional right to vote for electors for the President of the United States." End quote. So, if it isn't guaranteed in the Constitution, how and when did everybody get the right to vote? Well, after the Constitution was ratified in 1788, about 2/3 of white men in a majority of states could vote. So, this is where we started. In 1869, African American men were given the right to vote. Kind of, with the passage of the 15th Amendment. I say kind of because, of course, this was passed right after the Civil War, and many southern states would take it upon themselves to ensure that voting for Black Americans would be as difficult as possible with the passage of Jim Crow laws. These included certain prerequisites to vote, such as literacy tests, poll taxes, and for some states, property requirements. Except, of course, they also passed clauses to make sure these requirements only targeted certain individuals. Have you ever heard or said the phrase grandfathered in? This term has its roots in a series of statutes passed in the aftermath of the 15th Amendment. Balancing the desire to prohibit blacks from voting with the need to at least appear to be following federal law, many southern states passed what came to be known as grandfather clauses, a series of codes exempting certain individuals from having to meet the new voting requirements. These grandfather clauses stipulated if your grandfather was able to vote prior to usually 1867, or if you were a direct descendant of someone who could vote, you would be eligible. Can you guess who maybe did not have a grandfather able to vote before 1867? If you guess Black Americans, congratulations, you get the Civics and Coffee voting gold star. These laws would continue until the Supreme Court finally ruled them unconstitutional in 1915. Oddly, once these statutes were determined to be in violation of the Constitution, many white males became disenfranchised, unable to meet the prerequisites found in state law. In 1920, with the passage of the 19th Amendment, white women became eligible to vote. While the amendment states the right to a vote shall not be, quote, denied or abridged, end quote, on the basis of sex, the reality was that many black and brown women were excluded from the electoral process as a result of things like the poll tax mentioned earlier. So, while a step in the right direction, we still weren't at a place where all members of the democracy could participate in the voting process. And women's suffrage was a long, hard battle that I will cover in a future episode, with the earliest requests for the rights to vote occurring in the 1820s and 30s, and officially at the Convention of Seneca Falls in 1848. In 1924, the Snyder Act officially made Native American citizens of the United States. Now I know what you're thinking. Wait, hold up. The Constitution very clearly says any persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are considered citizens. And while you are correct, the Constitution also limited this when figuring out how and who to count in their population. Since Native Americans were given parcels of land deemed as their territory, they were treated as a separate and sovereign nation. This was supported in court decisions, such as the 1856 Dred Scott Supreme Court case, where the justices wrote members of a tribe could, quote, be naturalized by the authority of Congress and become citizens of a state and of the United States, and if an individual should leave his nation or tribe and take up his abode among the white population, he would be entitled to all the rights and privileges which would belong to an immigrant from any other foreign people, end quote. And so the original residents of this nation had to wait until 1924 to be recognized as citizens. But just because they were citizens didn't mean they could vote. It wasn't until 1962 that most Native Americans would secure the right to vote, again, having to secure their rights individually state by state. In 1964, in a run-up to the Civil Rights Act the following year, the 24th Amendment to the Constitution was passed, banning federal poll tax collection. Prior to the 24th Amendment, individuals had to pay to register to vote. It was only $1 in the 1960s, but if you adjust that for inflation, the cost was $20. Even in 2020, $20 seems a high price to pay to elect my government representatives. And while the 24th Amendment eliminated poll tax in federal elections, there were some states who still collected it in local elections until 1966, when the Supreme Court officially declared them unconstitutional. And most are aware that in 1965, the Voting Rights Act, seen as a landmark piece of legislation for civil rights, was passed. Signed by Lyndon B. Johnson, the Voting Rights Act extended the right to vote to most minorities and was amended a number of times to expand its reach. Two of the key pieces of the legislation was the concept of preclearance and something called the coverage formula. These two items prevented identified states from altering their voting requirements without the approval of the United States Attorney's Office. Any jurisdiction that, as of November 1964, 1968, or 1972, required a test or device as a condition to register to vote or actively cast a ballot was placed on the quote-unquote coverage formula and was required to submit requests to alter any of their voting processes to the U.S. Attorney and provide sufficient evidence to demonstrate their alterations in no way would lead to discrimination in who has access to the vote. The Voting Rights Act would be extended through many presidents, including Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, and even Ronald Reagan. It wasn't until a 2013 Supreme Court decision that the enforcement of the Voting Rights Act was removed, eliminating the coverage formula, and, can you guess? Laws aimed at voter suppression would be passed throughout the country. These laws sound harmless enough. Elimination of same-day voter registration, terminating online voter registration, ending early voting, ID requirements, restrictions on absentee voting, and so on. Proponents of these laws contend they help reduce fraudulent voting such as duplicate votes, voter impersonation, and the illegal use of an absentee ballot. In a review published by the Heritage Foundation, a total of 1,296 cases of voting-related fraud were listed. This review included various types of fraud, including ballot petition fraud, buying votes, and altering the vote count, in addition to things like duplicate or ineligible voting, and had convictions that dated back to 1982. So, almost 1,300 cases, over 38 years, in a country with 250 million eligible voters. Opponents argue that studies, like the one from the Heritage Foundation, prove voter fraud is a statistical improbability and point to the historically low voter participation in the United States as further evidence that voter fraud isn't a common or widespread issue. For example, in the 2016 presidential election, only 55% of eligible voters cast their ballot. Out of 250 million people who were eligible, that equates to roughly 138 million who exercised their right. Many argue it was the candidates who depressed turnout in 2016. People need to be excited to vote since it's such a hassle, right? However, America has had a historic issue with voter turnout going back decades. The last time turnout was in the 60th percentile was during the presidential election in 1968. And I know it isn't easy and can be a complete pain in the ass, especially if you're going to school or have a job that does not allow you time off to go vote. Having an election on the first Tuesday after the 1st of November is crazy, but it's also embedded in our history. Tuesday was picked to give farmers, enough time to get to their polling place. As irritating as it is that certain districts do not have enough polling places today, it was even worse in the days of yore. And why cold-ass November? Well, that's because summer was meant for farming. November was a safe time after harvest, but usually before the super harsh conditions of winter, although not always. So, I would argue, as annoying and confusing and irritating as it may be, many of our ancestors have fought hard for the right to vote. It isn't as guaranteed as we may think it is and should be cherished as a precious gift. America is unique in many ways, but our right to vote in a free and fair election is one of the things that has continued to set us apart from the rest of the world, despite our many other failings. So I leave you on this bonus episode to say nothing more than I really, truly hope you find it within yourself to vote, if you can. Because, despite how it may seem and how it may feel, your vote matters, and it is important to voice your opinions in this crazy democratic experiment of ours. Happy voting day. Cheers, peeps. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of Civics and Coffee. If you want to hear more small snippets from American history, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for joining me, and I look forward to our next cup of coffee together.